Welcome to Mad Men Men, a podcast dedicated to recapping and analyzing the AMC series Mad Men, but from the perspective of three totally different types of watchers. With me, he is watching the show for the very first time. His name is Will Ashton, and Will, you look a little sweaty. I know you were just dropping somebody off at their house after they didn't have a ride, so I know you must have been concerned for their health, and that's got you a little bit hot and bothered.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Hey, I'm looking around. Have you seen Mike anywhere?
Yeah, that's right. Mike is the person on the show who is rewatching the show for the first time since the series ended back in 2015. And, oh, hold on. I have this note that Mike left me. Forgot to read it. Here it is. John, Will, I love you guys. You're very handsome. But unfortunately, I have decided to quit Mad Men Men in order to pursue my acting career?
No.
This is outrageous. But we talk about Heinz baked beans, Will Ashton. How could...
I know.
This is as good as this job gets.
We had such witty banter that we did back and forth. Are we going to be able to do it with just you and me? I don't know.
Well, you know what? Maybe he'll be back. Maybe he'll learn the error of his ways and remember his roots, which is us, the podcast that records once a year. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, he'll have many opportunities to rethink his decision.
Yeah, he'll probably have been in 3 movies by then. And, it says here, too, that he's up for the same role as Cooper Hoffman. Well, I guess for listeners who don't know what Mike looks like, he is a dead ringer.
Yeah, I was surprised. You know, we talked about when we saw Saturday Night, I was like, who does this guy look like on screen? He's reminding me of somebody.
But did we bring that up during Licorice Pizza? Because we weren't doing Mad Men Men yet. But
we definitely talked about it during our Saturday Night review. I don't think did I know Mike in 2021?
Maybe. I think because we did Mad Men Men, we started it like not long after that movie. So I don't, I'll have to ask.
I mean, well,
and listeners, we're being for real. Mike legitimately looks like Cooper Hoffman, like a young Cooper. Sorry, he looks like an older Cooper Hoffman. It's uncanny. Same personality.
Cooper has to be around the same age as Mike, right? Like a little bit younger?
Mike, I think, is almost... I think Mike's in his late 20s.
Wow.
Cooper Hoffman age. I have it right here. Cooper Hoffman's only 22. Yeah, Mike is definitely not that young.
I don't know. I guess Cooper, I thought he was a little bit older. But I guess that makes sense because in Licorice Pizza, he's supposed to be in his teens. So, that tracks. Yeah.
I guess he totally was. Anyway, today we're going to talk about Lady Lazarus. And this is episode 8 of season 5. This one was directed by Phil Abraham, who also did the director's commentary with Matthew Weiner. Matthew Weiner wrote the script for this one. We are now at the midpoint, or Weiner calls it the real midpoint of this season. Technically, it's a little bit past the, I guess, technical midpoint, but he considers it the episode like right in the middle for him. And you're going to say?
I was going to say, yeah, I thought we were like kind of getting close to the 3/4 mark of the season.
I think he's thinking it's like the thematic midpoint. And this is the part of most Mad Men seasons post season 1 where we do see this trend in the writer's room where they like to start taking everything they've been setting up for 6-7 episodes and they start to deconstruct things. They start to throw in some like faster moving plot elements. And Lazy Lazarus has a bit of that. It only has 2 stories in it, which is very unusual for a Mad Men episode. It doesn't have like 3, 4, or even 5, which it sometimes has, but very limited on the character plots that are happening. We have the Pete stuff with the guy on the train and Alexis Bledel's appearance on the show, which I know you were expecting. You knew that she was going to show up eventually as somebody.
Well, I just knew she had a key role in the show and that she was involved with Pete because I knew that outside of the show, they were together and then got married. And then I guess they got divorced in 2022. I didn't realize that until I looked it up after the fact for this episode. But yeah, I mean, I knew that there was a relationship that bloomed from the show. So I knew that she was going to be a component of it at some point. And I kind of forgot about it until she showed up. And I was like, oh, yeah, she's like a key part of the show from what I had heard. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And she had a commentary that I listened to as well with Elizabeth Moss and Vincent Kartheiser. And it's kind of funny because they weren't, together yet, but you could sense a little bit of the, Vincent's being a little bit more like trying to make her laugh and stuff. I was thinking like, oh, you little dog, you have a little bit of a crush. I mean, who can blame him? I mean, look at those I mean, between his blue eyes and her blue eyes, shoot, it's like a whole ocean in that one scene.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we should say, I mean, most people probably know her from Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's had a few film roles. I know you love one of her films quite a lot.
Post-grad, of course. No way.
Well, that is from the director of Shrek, one of the directors of Shrek. But no, I was going to say you love I'm Reed Fish, which is a film that you've certainly seen, I'm sure, and love dearly and think about all the time.
I don't understand this bit. Like, yes, I've seen I Reed Fish.
You did see Reed Fish.
Did I say something that made you think that I was this I Reed Fish stan?
No, and this is like inside baseball, obviously, but I just remember it must have been like some sort of like COVID 2021, like stir craziness. I just remember seeing I'm Reed Fish and just being fascinated that there was this film that had such a peculiar title and like pretty big stars and just like didn't make a blip on any radar. It was just like such a like, just like a Sundance nothing film. It's like a stone that goes in the river but doesn't make a ripple. It just kind of just plops right down. And I got fascinated and I watched it and I forgot about it until I saw Alexis Wendell and I thought about my good friend John and I was like, oh yes, this movie that you were so obsessed with and couldn't stop talking. Yeah, you couldn't stop talking about it. When I bring it up, you'd be like, oh, Reed Fish. I am Reed Fish, not just the title of the film. You consider yourself Reed Fish. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's my fault. I must have done something to make you think that.
I don't know why.
But yeah, she did do that. That was like during her like not post Gilmore Girls, but like, you know, her star profile was going up during Gilmore Girls, mid 2000s. She was in a bunch of movies and stuff, like post grad, Sister of the Traveling Pants and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Tuck Everlasting, right? She's in that one too.
Tuck Everlasting, that was supposed to be her, you know, kind of like, I guess, breakout role. She technically has like an uncredited role in Rushmore, I want to say, which what a shame that Mike isn't here. He loves that movie. But she definitely kind of in her post sort of like, can she be a star kind of part of her career? She did slow down quite a bit in terms of like TV and movies and stuff. I know like Handmaid's Tale was kind of like her big thing in the last like decade that you know, she had a main role in it. Yeah.
I had no idea she was in Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, Elizabeth Moss and her, you know, which kind of makes sense, right? But yeah, that was definitely like her biggest thing that she's done aside from, in terms of TV, that's her biggest thing aside from Mad Men and Gilmore Girls. And Mad Men, I mean, you know, I'm not going to give away how many episodes she's in. She might be in another one, she might not. But, you know, Handmaid's Tale, it was like a main role.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know they did like that revival of Gilmore Girls for Netflix, like almost a decade ago.
A Year in the Life or whatever it was.
Maybe, I don't know. I just feel like that was like the first time she was on my radar again in a long time, probably since post grad.
She didn't do much. She did like some small movies, and that was about it. And you know, some minor like TV roles. She was in like, she booked some kind of TV show right before Handmaid's Tale, like a year or two. And I don't remember the name of it, but it didn't really go anywhere. I want to say, I think it was like, I don't know, maybe one season, but yeah. Us and Them, I found it. She was a main role in that. I never saw it though. I think it was 7 episodes. That's it.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it was her and Jason Ritter. Yeah, the son of John Ritter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway,
I met him in New York.
So like I was saying, we have that plot. It's like 2 A plots in this. I would say that is basically an A plot. You could say it's a B plot. I guess to be fair, we'll say it's a B plot. It's probably technically. But then the A plot is Megan finally confesses to Don. It's a real like domino effect from the last episode, the Codfish Ball, where we saw the seeds really of Megan really questioning whether or not she wants to work as a copywriter. And it had been seeded throughout the whole first part of the season. Like, I think the whole Howard Johnson's thing really started to get across, like, no, she's her own independent person and she's not going to get pushed around, right? And I guess the first, Little Kiss had a bit of that too, with the way that she and Don have their big, you know, blow up. But this episode is where it comes to a head and she leaves Sterling Cooper Draper Price. Very interesting episode. Very, very big moment for the Megan character, for Jessica Paré. Well, did you like this one? I know Tea Leaves, you were a little bit less hot on that episode. But what about this? Did you find this one to be more of an improvement? Kind of the same, worse? What do you think?
Well, Tea Leaves was like a little while ago, right? That was episode 3.
Well, you're right. It's because I'm thinking of the last one I edited. Sorry, Codfish Ball. That was one I was thinking of.
Yeah, I did like that one too. I like this one, I think, a little bit more than that. I feel like, as you mentioned, it was a little bit more focused and streamlined, and I think it really came together in a compelling way. I thought kind of paralleling Don and Pete again, because I feel like I don't know. Maybe it's just because we record these episodes so far in between them, but I feel like Pete hasn't really been central to the show for a little while. And I feel like he's kind of been in the margins more than usual. So it was nice to kind of see him be his squirmy little self
Well,
again in the focus.
in the commentary, Matthew Weiner, or sorry, Vincent Kartheiser even says, he's like, yeah, at the beginning of the season, Matthew Weiner told him that like Pete Campbell's going to get his ass kicked in this season. And he was like, I didn't know he meant literally. So, referring to the fight with Lane. But he says that this is the episode where he feels like that's really starting to come about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, that was probably the last time he really was central to the show. And that was, I mean, that was a great episode, so that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, just kind of seeing him and Dawn getting paralleled again, I feel like that kind of goes back to like the first two seasons when they were so kind of crucial to their own personal evolutions, kind of having them be kind of opposites and similar, and having similar dynamics together, just kind of feels like a classic kind of throwback. But having, obviously some kind of more modern influences. I mean, that elevator scene is probably going to be the one that's the most remembered from this episode, outside maybe the Alexis Blundell stuff. And I mean, that kind of just feels very much like the later seasons of Sopranos, where it feels almost sort of otherworldly in a weird way, like something that just kind of takes you back because of how like eerie it is in an unexpected and kind of poignant way. And I mean, I that makes the stuff like that really makes me curious about where the second half of the show is going to go next.
Let's talk about that. The elevator moment. What was your take on that? What do you
Well, I
think it
mean, I
means?
think Zoller Slice, I think in Mad Men Carousel broke it down pretty well, but I think it really just kind of comes down to Dawn in this episode. And I think one of the main reasons why Pete is so central to it is that Dawn is at this point now where he feels increasingly more out of step with the younger culture and maybe even culture in general. So he needs so much to be keyed into culture for his job to do it well and to understand where the tides are turning. But he's at this sort of oasis moment where he thought he kind of got his life back on track with dating Megan. And I think to some respect he did. I think
Yeah.
thing
And she makes
he
him
seems
feel
to be,
younger.
yeah. I think, for the sort of dubious reasons that they got together and the troubles that they've had throughout the season, I do think they're in a more healthy than not relationship. And I really like the scene with them in bed, kind of talking about Megan's future and her leaving the company. But I do think, Dawn's at this point now where he needs Megan not only for emotional support and for this desire not to feel so isolated and alone, but also just in the sense of like, she's more in tune to the culture. We saw in the last episode, like she's able to really bounce off of him and kind of like spark some productive and thoughtful ideas and allow the business to kind of go where it needs to go for the future. And now she's doing her own thing. He's supportive and he wants to encourage her, but there's this sort of like almost like looking off the bridge moment where he's kind of realizing that his life is sort of stagnated and it's at a point where he's probably got more years behind him than in front of him at this point, especially with the amount that he drinks and smokes. So yeah, I mean, I think that Zoller Slice kind of talked about how like there are these little moments in life where like, maybe you take a step, you almost get hit by a bus, or like you veer off the road for a little bit or something, like these little like minor moments that like in a film or a show or something would seem so pivotal, like it's a near death experience. But for you, it's just like, oh, that was scary. But then you go back to like eating your lunch or, going to do the errands that you wanted to do. And I think that's kind of like where Dawn's at right now, is that like, he's at this point where it's like so crucial and a turning point for him, but it's also sort of banal and just kind of routine that, things always are sort of changing. Things are always sort of adapting. And he has been somebody that's been so chameleon-like in his ways of just kind of evolving or having to kind of go with the flow to keep moving forward, that it's almost like a nature to him to have to kind of have that sort of moment in a way, but also still sort of something that takes him aback in a minor sort of way.
Yeah, and I think you're really touching on something that, like you said, I think this episode does a really good job demonstrating that point, right? That this is the show where it's like Don is realizing the truth that we've all kind of noticed for a while, which is that he can't keep up, right? And he's slowing down. And this episode really feels like it's a shift for him in a very specific way, but in relation, like you said, to like the cultural tides, they are a changing and all of that. And it just seems like Don He doesn't get it. He seems totally uncomfortable by it, but he's like trying so hard, like through that facial acting he's doing in the bed scene, like you mentioned. He's trying so hard to like be reasonable, be like understanding, like I just want you to do what you want to do. But then of course when he's with Roger later, he's like, I just wanted indoor plumbing. Right. When he's being honest, it's a little bit more like with Roger, he feels like he can talk to somebody who gets it because Roger's of a different age cohort, an older brother type figure. And he can actually say the truth, which is like, I just don't get like the entitlement of you get to choose what you want to do. Like I had to do what I did out of survival, and that disconnect is something that is core to why he can't keep up because it's a fundamental difference between the generations. And it was interesting because in the commentary with the cast of Vincent and Elizabeth and Alexis Bledel, when they were kind of talking about this, they actually had like a little bit of a discussion because none of them knew for sure. I think it was Elizabeth Moss who's like, "Yeah, what do you think that meant?" And as the three of them kind of pontificated and kind of touched on some things. I think one of the things was it was like near death experience or I think, but then Vincent Kartheiser comes at it and he's like, well, she's going somewhere that he can't follow. And that like, and everybody was like, oh, and he's like, I came up with that on the spot. It was actually very charming. But then they went on from there. It was a really lovely kind of discussion about that and that symbolism. And it does ring true, right? Of using that visual symbolism to like, you get the feeling of it, right? Of like, she's somewhere. And if he tried to keep up with her, it's going to kill him. Literally would kill him. And I think that that's why I really like how the episode doesn't have him getting super drunk and showing up super late at night. Like it shows him giving effort, right? It shows him that he's trying to keep up. He's trying to rise to the occasion. But there's a feeling like that's why I think it's great why the episode ends with the needle drop, which we got to talk about. And it's one of my favorite endings to any Mad Men episode. I love it because I remember first seeing it and my expectation is going to be like maybe he hears the song and it changes something in him and it opens him up, opens his mind. That's the whole point of the song. It's like, open your mind, and then he just abruptly takes it off, which we've never seen that with like an episode of the show where like a character messes with the final song of like an episode of the show. And I love that moment because it's meta, of course, but it also drives the point home that, yeah, no, it's not for him. It's not a song that touches him dearly. I love that song, Tomorrow Never Knows. And yeah, I know Will Ashton. You kind of mentioned it. It must have cost them a pretty penny. Do you want to know how they did it? Got the song?
I mean, I saw that in the carousel chapter they spent like $250,000 to get the licensing for it.
Well, they paid for permission, but they found way. So Weiner kind of alludes to them kind of doing them a solid with it, but not paying as much as they would have had to otherwise. But also, it was billed under like a creative collaboration or something. And yeah, I think that like Weiner even says he like pushed really hard for the song. And what I like about it too is that you don't expect it if you are steeped in television lore. Like a lot of the people at the time watching this, like Matt Zoller cites, they knew that like when you start the episode and you have like, oh, they want to hear the Beatles, but we can't hear the Beatles. And then we heard like the Rolling Stones came about earlier in the season. And it's like, oh, we're not actually going to hear any Rolling Stones songs, are we? But then the big surprise is like, no, we are going to hear a Beatles song. And it's like Matthew Weiner kind of being like, okay, TV critics, like I see you, I hear you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, since you by this point, you're probably watching it live, right? Or were you still like catching up with the show when this episode
Season 5 was when I was watching it week to week. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, is this like kind of the moment like that really cements like the show is like a major cultural shift? Like the fact that they can get the Beatles and like play the Beatles, is that like a point where it's like,
I think we were past that point, honestly. Yeah, I do think that it did cause a stir, I remember. And I remember being steeped in it myself because this came out 2012. So this was like a couple years after the peak of my Beatles obsession. My Beatles obsession was mainly like freshman year of college, sophomore year of college, and then it kind of came and went over the years. So like this is like I'm very steeped in Beatles at this point. Like I have listened to every song many times over at this point in my life. But like hearing it on a TV show was definitely like, whoa, like you don't expect that because of like if you know anything about like the Beatles history, it's like they famously were like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to sell out, are we? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was a pretty good John, I'll admit.
Thanks.
Or was that supposed to be Paul?
I was going for Ringo, but
Ringo. Okay. Well, in any case, it sounded like one of those
clearly
Liverpool
wasn't that
boys.
Good.
Yeah, I thought it was all right. I thought it was pretty good. Well, by this point, because initially Michael Jackson owned the rights, like for like the 90s, I think through the 2000s, And this episode's like
think that's still the
20. Is
Jackson
this
had
like
been
20?
dead though at this point, I think.
Right. That's what I mean. So like, were the rights in limbo at this point?
That's a good question. I think they were. I think it was still owned by Apple Corp, but I'd have to double check that because I remember this was around the time when all the Beatles songs, they released them as like you didn't have to buy the all set, the whole master set to get all the master recordings. Because I remember that was a huge deal. I bought the master recording set in college. That was a big gift to myself, just so I could listen to it on, like my iPod or whatever. And I want to say it was still like I think we were still a year or two, maybe more away from like it opening up more.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just thought like part of the reason why like Beatles music became more readily available in the 20s was because the Jackson estate was like giving them off, and like,
it's a long process though. Yeah, it took time.
What's your favorite Beatles album? I don't know if we've ever discussed that.
That one ebbs and flows too. Sgt. Pepper and Rubber Soul are the two that I go back to a lot. And I think like Abbey Road is definitely the one that I think I like the most songs on Abbey Road. Like if I looked at it as which one has my favorite just quantity of quality, then it's probably Abbey Road. My favorite one to just listen to thematically, like from start to finish, is Sgt. Pepper. Rubber Soul has just some of my favorite songs, period. My favorite Beatles songs. So that's kind of the weird relationship between those three. And I like the other albums too, for sure, but it's just a different relationship I have. Revolver is obviously very good.
I was gonna
just
say,
not quite up there for me.
I had a feeling maybe that Revolver was your favorite. That's why I was bringing it up.
No, do you have a favorite yourself?
Oh, I mean, Abbey Road's probably my favorite. That's like the obvious answer. I just feel like that's just their best album. But I feel like, unlike you, like to me, I look at Abbey Road as like the most complete album. Whereas if I'm talking on like a song to song basis, honestly, it might be Let It Be.
That's a fun one to pick. Yeah, because I think with Let It Be, that's like the era where to me it almost feels like a continuation, not a continuation of Abbey Road, but like or like a complement to Abbey Road for me. Like to me, you could put those albums together and it would still, like a Vampire Weekend album, it would feel like they all kind of go together in a certain way. But yeah, Beatles fans over here. Lady Lazarus though, that's not a Beatles reference. Did the Carousel book get into the like what the title means?
Well, the Cynthia Plath thing.
Yeah.
I mean, just like what I already kind of knew. I mean, they got a little bit more.
I wasn't sure if you were
into
familiar
it.
with the poem itself.
Well, it's like, is it her last one or like one of her last ones? It was like detailing her death, I believe, or like kind of talking about her susuicidal ideation. I believe, right?
It was published in 1965, and it was originally in one of her early collections. I think it was the second collection, Ariel. So it was about 2 years after her death. And yeah, Lady Lazarus definitely was one of her more like well-known ones. I don't want to say I've read a ton of Sylvia Plath, probably only like 10 poems at best.
Yeah, I'm probably about the same. I know of that one. That's like one of her most famous ones.
Yeah, it's like the Holocaust one, which is interesting because, we have an episode called Lady Lazarus. Yeah, back to the original question. Did Zoller Seitz have his own kind of interpretation of like why they went with this as the title?
I think he detailed it a little bit. Like there is a footnote about it, but yeah, he I don't remember exactly what he said, so I'm not going to pretend to quote it verbatim, but he discussed a little bit of the like parallels and the meanings behind it.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I think even people who might be aware of just Lazarus, like the biblical story of Lazarus and all of that, Weiner, when he was talking about it with Abraham, he said it's about rebirth, control, performance. He considers Megan to be the Lazarus figure, but he specifically was like, yeah, not in the religious sense. He sees her as Lazarus in the Sylvia Plath sense. So like she kills off her persona as Don's creative agent or partner at the agency. And we see that really dramatically with the Mr. and Mrs. Draper bit, right? Where Peggy has to fill in because Megan is missing. And she kind of resurrects herself as an actress. And I think that's why, like, it's pretty on the nose, but like like the last thing we see of Megan is she's like pretending to be dead in the acting class, right? So it definitely feels like a little bit like, all right, let's play with that a bit. And he did say, though, he doesn't think of the poem as just about death. He sees it as like it's about putting on a show, hence that final moment. So like her exit is a type of performance according to him, right? She's trying to leave with grace. She's trying to leave with purpose, almost kind of like too perfectly, which is what really he thinks unsettles Don, right?
Well, I was going to say, as far as that little montage goes, yeah, obviously she's playing dead in a sense, but I feel like she's the only one that seems like content, like the only one that has any sort of like sense of ease. Like everyone else we see, Pete's obviously a little lovelorn. Alexis Blundell seems unhappy. Don doesn't seem very happy, obviously. Peggy's smoking some grass, but she still seems pretty unhappy. Like only her, but she's like, in this like state of playing dead. Like, but she seems tranquil, which I find very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could also read into it nodding at how like Don can't resurrect himself, right? Like he can't follow her down the elevator shaft because he's not going to he can't reinvent himself again. He's already done it. He did it as Don Draper, but that's over. I think there's something about that kind of gets to him where it's like I've reached this point in my age where the thing that got me to where I am, I can't do that again. I'm kind of stuck with what I have. And if you recall in the first season, he played with that a lot when he was a bit younger.
Mhm.
5-6 years younger, he's thinking to himself like, should I just run away? Should I, me and Rachel can go make a go of it. I think that era is over, and he's like not liking that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's fascinating going back to the conversation that they have in the middle of the night on the bed that, it kind of flickers on and off, but I feel like that's the first time in a little while that we see Dick kind of come back a little bit. In his like facial expressions, you see a little bit of Dick's kind of idealism sort of come out, and like when he's supporting Megan, you can see kind of like sincerity kind of flickers in his eyes again. I think it doesn't come as readily as I think it has in other moments, like when Don and Peggy are kind of talking at the end of whatever that was, season 3 or 4. But yeah, it seems like that's more Dick, and there's more Dick in that conversation than we've seen from Don throughout this season, at least.
What about the Peggy stuff? We have a lot of Peggy in this. She's kind of the sort of person in the middle of everything, and she kind of has to like navigate this weirdness. It reminds me of like when she had to like be the mediator between Don and Betty in season 1 when she was the secretary. And clearly like we see how much she's changed because she's not that same character anymore. When she gets caught in the middle and like one person's lying and she has to deal with it, she's like visibly uncomfortable. And I like Peggy a lot in this episode. I'm glad she did one of the commentaries. Did you have any takeaways with her that you thought were interesting?
Well, I think that's a good transition because I was taken by how Dawn-esque Peggy can be at certain points in this episode. Certainly that bathroom scene, you can see a lot of like Dawn's influence kind of ease its way naturally into her kind of sternness and her desire to like kind of be the one that's like wearing the pants in the office and being like, you can't be messing around, in the way that like Dawn would kind of dress her down in like the first couple seasons. It seems like she's mirroring his influence there. And it's fascinating that she's kind of being the more traditional Dawn archetype when Dawn himself, again, seems like kind of adrift and aloof and at the same time wanting to be supportive for, emotional and personal reasons. But yeah, it's just like, I think there's obviously a lot of interesting stuff that's going on between Peggy and Dawn. And I feel like this kind of feels in its own little way like a slight continuation of their episode together, the suitcase. Like when they kind of go the blows, it feels like some of those past resentments are kind of coming to a head. And it's obviously not just about the pitch or the Cool Whip necessarily, but some more stuff that's kind of getting in there. And poor Ken just kind of has to be like the child in the corner, I love the it's a classic comedy thing, but the reveal of that lady also being in the room with the notepad when they're having their argument and Don's about to smoke and he's like, "Oh, there's no smoking in here."
Yeah, which I'd say is like the first time in the show that somebody drops a line like that. It's just one more like the times are changing kind of thing.
Right. Well, I didn't know if it was for that reason or if it was like because it's like kind of a lab sort of thing.
That's the thing is it's still kind of showing that like it's a health concern, and you can imagine in 1960, they would have had the same sort of like people were smoking in the doctor's office, right? So it's like you can kind of just see Don being like, "Oh, this nonsense again." So I do want to say, the Peggy stuff. I think that one of the more interesting things that happens too is that like she like straight up scolds Don in this, and he kind of lets her, right? Because they have that argument and they're kind of like going back and forth, and he's saying things that are objectively untrue. That like he's trying to blame this on Peggy because he's an avoidant. And he's just basically like, you were threatened by everything about her, blah, blah, blah. And she's just like, I did so much. Like, she was like, we saw her visibly, like, clearly be like really, really gracious. Like, she wasn't perfect to Megan. She said things to Megan that were a bit, ridiculous, but like, clearly, like, there was no real tangible animosity between them, but it's like Don's projecting of like she hates the industry because of people like you. It's like, well, who's her boss, Don? Like there's just like a lack of self-awareness. But
That
she
takes
scolds him.
yeah, that takes a lot of guts. Yeah, no, I do think it's funny that like Don's excuses outside of that stuff, that like the objectively untrue stuff, is like actor stuff, where he's like, well, I knew my lines, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
like just like all this like stuff that like, you know,
It made me wonder when I first saw it. I was like, Peggy's pretty competent, right? So like, why did she have trouble doing the thing? Is it just because like she's not an actress and so she can't? Is this like a
well,
reference to season one where she wasn't able to do casting very well?
maybe. I mean, she was also clearly like, you know, bitter when they were doing that thing earlier. So it's not like she was like really like,
Heart wasn't in it.
yeah. Although she knew the line then, the like, just say it or whatever it was, the just take it already.
Just
So
take it. Just taste it. Just try it. I think it's because like she thinks "just try it" is a better line. She's like just getting confused. I don't know. It's funny. It's funny. But yeah, that covers a lot of stuff. Did you want to talk more about the Pete stuff? Because I know we touched on it. Obviously, there's
yeah,
more you could say to it in terms of
I
like,
mean,
yeah,
the one thing I want to say before we get into the Pete stuff is that, to your point about like the smoking, I do really appreciate, and I think Zoller Seiss talks about this a fair bit, that like we're getting past the like traditional cigarette era and more like the weed era, and that's kind of mirroring Revolver and how that was like when the Beatles were like really getting into their like psychedelics and their like heavy weed and stuff. And I feel like seeing Peggy like smoking in the office, kind of blasé, also kind of ushers in that like we're getting deeper into the 60s and all that. I thought that was interesting.
yeah. For the Pete stuff, I want to bring up something that Emily St. James said in her review of the episode back in when the show came out. St. James said, in this fifth season, Mad Men has all but perfected the art of taking over obvious symbols, so the elevator shaft, the window fog, then not insisting they apply to the characters as a whole. Don feels the bottom dropping out in a way he can't articulate, so he takes it out on Peggy. Pete has fallen in love with someone who might as well be a helpless child, playing at being grown up. But these circumstances don't apply unilaterally. These are all people trapped in their own lives, and the episode chooses one perfect image for each and every one of them. But it doesn't stretch to make those images do too much of the work. It's just fantastic television, and it continues a streak that might be the very best stretch of episodes the show has ever produced. Seriously, is there a stretch to rival Signal 30 through this episode? And I know a lot of you would include Mystery Date in there as well. What do you think of that? I mean, it's high praise, and remember, St. James is coming at this right, with knowing what she knows about Mad Men just up until this point.
Yeah, I
Also, this
mean,
is for AV Club. I don't know if I mentioned that.
right. I think I've said it before that, you know, for whatever criticisms I may have had about individual episodes or whatever, I do think this is probably the best season thus far. I just feel like it's the most confident. It just seems like it's the most consistent, and it just kind of seems like they're really in their groove right now in a way that you know is pretty exhilarating to watch as a first time viewer. Yeah, no, I definitely echo a lot of her sentiments for sure.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I remember this time. This was like a very exciting time to be a Mad Men fan because we were in this kind of era where it felt like Mad Men could do no wrong. And when an episode came out, it was still like in the early social media days in the context of like social media the way we know it through microblogging social media like Twitter, Tumblr, stuff like that. I think Tumblr wasn't really at its big thing yet. That was going to be more Game of Thrones. And this is around the time I think like Scandal had sort of started its kind of like the phenomenon of like Black Twitter. So Mad Men was still kind of like more in the yuppie sort of place where you heard about Mad Men because of NPR, because like people on the radio talked about Mad Men. It was sort of this like, I don't want to say gatekeeper kind of show, but it was this show that you watched if you wanted serious television. And it felt like a continuation of part of the continuation of like what happened after Sopranos, where Breaking Bad and Mad Men kind of inherited that kind of that kind of approach to prestige television. And I don't want to leave out the leftovers, but even that I don't think had nearly the same cultural permeation as Breaking Bad did and Mad Men did to a somewhat lesser extent. Though I have to say, I mean, Breaking Bad still lives on pretty strongly these days through a lot of memes. But I don't see a lot of people talking about Breaking Bad in a very literary sense or in a very like this show really did a lot of things incredibly well kind of sense, but more as like this was a really good show. They did a great job with it. I feel like Better Call Saul has had a more, I think, like literary legacy in terms of like this was an even better realization of this character. Versus Mad Men, I think people still like break the show down and really find it to just be this like awesome show not everybody discovered when it was coming out, but still has so many more things to kind of unpack. I don't know if that's fair though.
I don't know. I mean, if anything, I feel like more people talk about Breaking Bad than Mad Men at this point.
Yes. But I feel like a lot of it's through memes. I think a lot of it's through
Part
like,
of it. Yeah.
right? Like I don't see people like bring up episodes of Breaking Bad as like this was television at its finest. Nearly as much as I see people being like, Mad Men, I'm watching Mad Men for the first time and it's so much better than whatever.
Yeah,
But that could be
different.
my own bubble, right?
Yeah, different timelines. Maybe Blue Sky is different. But yeah, I don't know about that. But I do think, I mean, I have seen what you're talking about where people have said that they thought Better Call Saul was overall a better show than Breaking Bad. I think they're hard to compare, and I think I ultimately side more with Breaking Bad because I feel like Better Call Saul, for as good as it was, always sort of lived in Breaking Bad's shadow and was never fully able to kind of separate itself and be its own thing. And so and I think by the end it really was able to kind of do that better. Like the last season of Better Call Saul is fantastic. But
at
yeah,
the very
I mean,
least,
yeah.
I think you can say that when you compare Vince Gilligan with Matthew Weiner, like Gilligan was able to like do another show that got a lot of acclaim, versus Weiner has not really done anything of note since Mad Men,
Well,
or he's tried to but has failed ultimately.
I mean, I guess we can kind of bring up, it will be old news by the time this episode comes out, but there is the whole Sasha Mamet thing. It's like, it's an article, but it's part of her, I guess, memoir collection of essays that she has out. And she doesn't mention Mad Men directly, but I mean, it's easy to infer that, it sounds like Matthew Weiner was a fairly, abusive and grummanaging creator. And even Sasha Mamet kind of talks about at the end that, like, there's probably a good reason why Weiner hasn't found, for all the critical praise and the recognition of his genius, there's a good reason why outside of like the Romanoffs and that movie he did with Owen Wilson, he hasn't really done much in the intervening times. Though I do think it's interesting that he hasn't gotten into like writing novels or anything, considering how literary, Mad Men tends to be and stuff. I feel like that would be the most sensible kind of transition for him, if he's not finding work as a television creator or producer.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there, I guess.
Yeah, and so just to give people context, because we're recording this in like mid to late September 2025.
Do you remember?
Mamet came out with this collection of essays called Does This Make Me Funny? And she does reference in it that she said she had a former verbally abusive boss who led her to quit one of the biggest shows on television. And so people, of course, inferred that she was referring to Matthew Weiner, the showrunner of Mad Men, because the timeline of when she left Mad Men, which we've already covered that episode. So now Will Ashton, she's not coming back. That was Mystery Date when she's showing the photos. And that was the episode directed by Matt Shackman, funny enough, for Fantastic Four. But apparently she said that like she opened up about how he had been screaming at her back in this time. She left set, told her agent she was quitting the show. She was actually scheduled for more episodes. She doesn't technically name the show or the showrunner in the book, but because of the way this transitioned to her work in Girls, people at the time, I think people were like, oh yeah, she left Mad Men because she was doing Girls, which, okay, but she had a small role in Mad Men, and Alison Brie was doing both, Mad Men and Community. So, you could, I think there was just like this, a lot of people were probably like, oh yeah, her character didn't have much use left, and maybe to the writers, however you want to phrase it. But yeah, that's kind of the context.
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate because obviously, like I said, I mean, Matthew Weiner is a sort of undeniable talent, but I mean, the times, as this episode details, they are changing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he couldn't keep up, right?
Yeah.
He couldn't.
That's a nice way to kind of tie it all back, I guess. So yeah.
But hey, we should. Last note on that: David Chase was able to make The Sopranos really late in his career, right? Like sometimes people come out with their best stuff when they're much older, but everybody's different. I think a lot of people would agree, at least at this point, that Weiner just had one show in him that was going to be what it was, and since then hasn't quite found. I'm sure he would consider that differently. We'll never know, but for sure. But yeah.
For all we know, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, he might be well into the first season of his next show, and it'll be
Better
making us
Call
look
Sal.
like a Better Call Sal, or I mean, I wish, if only we got the continued adventures of Sal in the 60s and 70s, I would love it.
All right. Well, that will do it for this week's Mad Men Men. Hopefully, Mike rethinks his decision to pursue acting. And yeah.
I actually got a note from Mike, if you are okay with me reading it.
Yes, I would love that.
Okay. It says, "Hi, Mike." Or sorry, hang on, let me try that again. Hey, John and friend. This is Mike here. I have been working really hard in auditioning and stuff, but I'm afraid that Cooper Hoffman he has too much aura. I think he's been crying. It seems like there's like a lot of ink stains. It's hard to read this one. He is just too good, too strong, too handsome. I will be returning to the show next week to discuss whatever the next episode is. Oh, wow.
Actually, I don't know why, but that reminds me. I can't believe we left out one of my favorite gags in this episode and in this season so far is the whole like Harry is like walking into the office while Pete's on the phone and Pete is like opening the door and he's just like, "What? You open the door? Like, what do you want?" And he just like walks away. And it's like, why is that in there? I think it's just I know why it's in there, but it's just funny.
I did want to mention that, like, and I know Harry Crane sucks and yada yada yada, but I do think this is maybe the funniest he's been. Just
Trudy
with that
pregnant again?
Yeah, like with that, and then like him like being like, "I thought it was majestic," and just him talking about, I don't know, he has like a love, talking about his allegedly big dick, all this. He's funnier in this and more tolerable than he's been, I think, since
I
ever.
won't go that far, but I understand where you're coming from. To be fair, I think that we didn't talk about the insurance guy and like more of the layers behind that, but I think for me it was just because it was very like, this character is kind of doing what you expect. That to me wasn't the meat of the episode. It was just like a means to an end. And then Pete, just like the obsession he has with this person, I think it makes sense when you look back on the episode. But I think in the moment, it does feel weird. It's like, geez, Pete, like.
Well, I mean, that kind of just ties back to the parallels with Don, right? Is that like I think there's a part of him, even though he is clearly successful, as we see with him landing the skis and like making friends even before he meets clients.
It's getting a little too big for his skis, I think is the joke there.
Yeah. But he still is, I think there's a part of him that's like, well, I want to be the guy that's like having a double life. I want to be the guy that's having an affair and kind of getting all the like naughty blasé. I mean, obviously we kind of saw that obviously to a horrifying extent when he assaulted that one neighbor. And, like I think there's a part of him that feels sort of entitled to this.
He wants to be a king.
Yeah.
That was his sexual fantasy, right? He wants to be the hero, the savior, the hunter with the gun, and he thinks that's what will bring him happiness. And
that was so gross when Alexis Blundell was like, "I'll be fantasizing about it too." It's like, oh.
I think she's just saying that she thinks it might work. Maybe it does. It doesn't. We know, but it's still just...
considering that they got together, the actors, I feel like there's some truth there.
Maybe it worked, in the show, it was so charming.
Yeah.
That it bled into real life, who knows? But only for less than a decade. All right, that'll do it for Mad Men Men. Thanks for listening. It sounds like we'll have Mike back. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I already miss him, but I'm glad he learned his lesson.
I just hope he's not too sad.
Yeah, same. All right, but we'll see you all next time on Mad Men Men. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.